Welcome to the Office of Tax Appeals. We are ready to begin with the appeal of McCarthy. The OTA case number is 230513448. The oral hearing is being live streamed. Also present is a stenographer, Ms. Alonso, who is reporting this hearing verbatim. To ensure that we have an accurate record, we ask that everyone speaks one at a time and does not speak over each other. Also, speak clearly and loudly. When needed, Ms. Alonso will stop the hearing process and ask for clarification. After the hearing, Ms. Alonso will produce the official hearing transcript, which will be available on the Office of Tax Appeals website. As a reminder, these proceedings are being broadcast live, and anything said today and any information shared today is publicly viewable on the record or on the live stream. With that said, are there any questions before we go on the record?
No.
Okay. No from Franchise Tax Board as well. Ms. Alonso, are you ready to go on the record? Thank you. We are opening the record in the appeal of McCarthy. The OTA case number is 230513448. This matter is being held before the Office of Tax Appeals. Today's date is September 19th, 2024, and the time is approximately 1:45 p.m. This hearing is being convened electronically. Today's hearing is being heard by a panel of 3 administrative law judges. My name is Keith Long, and I will be the lead administrative law judge. Judge Asaf Kletter and Judge Tommy Leung are the other members of this tax appeals panel. All 3 judges will meet after the hearing and produce a written decision as equal participants. Although I will conduct the hearing, any judge on this panel may ask questions or otherwise participate to ensure that we have all the information needed to decide this appeal. As a reminder, the Office of Tax Appeals is not a tax court. It is an independent appeals body. The panel does not engage in ex parte communications with either party. OTA will issue an opinion based on the parties' arguments, the admitted evidence, and the relevant law. For the record, will the parties please state their names and who they represent, starting with the representative for Franchise Tax Board.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Yadal, representing Franchise Tax Board.
And for appellant?
I'm Scott McCarthy, the taxpayer.
Thank you. The issue to be heard today is whether appellant has shown reasonable cause for the late filing of his 2021 California income tax return. After the pre-hearing conference, appellant identified Kristen Williams as a witness. As a reminder, witness testimony is not required for an oral hearing. However, testimony given under oath may be considered as evidence. Additionally, FTB is given the opportunity to cross-examine any witness. Would appellant please confirm that it will present witness testimony during this hearing?
Confirmed.
And Mr. Yadao, does Franchise Tax Board have any objections to the witness?
No objections.
Thank you. Then I will take the witness affirmations now. Ms. Williams, will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You may lower your hand. Okay, moving forward, prior to the pre-hearing conference, FTB identified exhibits A through E. At the pre-hearing conference, appellant had no objections to these exhibits. After the pre-hearing conference, FTB timely submitted additional exhibits F and G. Does appellant have any objections to these exhibits?
No.
Thank you. FTB exhibits A through G are admitted without objection. Additionally, at the pre-hearing conference, appellant exhibit 1, letter from L.J. Berzel, MD, was identified. FTB did not have any objections to this exhibit at the pre-hearing conference. Can FTB confirm that there are no objections now?
FTB has no objections to appellant's exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you. Exhibit 1, letter from L.J. Berzel, MD, is admitted without objection. Today's hearing is estimated to take approximately 30 minutes, begins with the appellant's opening presentation and witness testimony. Um, Mr. McCarthy, you requested 5 minutes, but that was prior to identifying your witness. Do you need a little bit longer today?
I don't expect it would be more than 10 minutes total.
Okay, 10 minutes it is. Mr. McCarthy, you may begin when ready.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you all. Appreciate your time today. So I've filed this appeal because I genuinely believe that I have established the reasonable cause to obtain a refund when I first during the tax year, as part of the letter from my doctor, Lyndon Brazel, around tax time in 2022, the filing time, I had several medical issues. One was shingles. I had shingles all over my face. It took a long time to go away. It ultimately came back. I subsequently then also had COVID. I had COVID right at or right around the normal tax filing time. I have never, to the best of my knowledge, filed my taxes late. So historically, I have always paid on time. During the time that I had COVID, around the tax filing time, my doctor said at the time it was right in the middle of the pandemic. I don't know that anyone was fully familiar with the notion of long COVID or potentially the ramifications of long COVID. But ultimately, that was what I was diagnosed with. And so once I was fully able to recover, or not even fully recover, but once I began to recover, I realized, I think in the beginning of the year of 2023, that I had neglected to file my taxes. Interestingly enough, this was probably the most significant tax year of my life. I was fortunate enough to sell some stock in a company that I had co-founded. And so this turned out to be the single most significant tax payment year of my life. Of course, I would not willfully file that late if it wasn't for the fact that I was suffering from a few medical issues. As soon as I found or came to realize that I had not filed, I contacted my accountant. Interestingly enough, my accountant also, I think because of the chaos during COVID, had not caught it either. And we filed as quickly as we possibly can. Obviously, we paid the late penalty at that time. My accountant informed me that I could file an appeal. And my understanding of the legal issue here is that I have to establish that my failure to file in a timely manner is due to reasonable cause. So reasonable cause and not willful neglect. And my understanding of the word willful is intentional or deliberate. I think that my doctor's note shows that I was going through significant medical issues at the time. When the initial appeal was declined, it was declined, and the reason said was that because I had basically, let's see, I won't use the word properly here, that I had, I'll look for it up, that I had been unable to file my taxes, and yet I was able to continue my position. I had not been placed on leave, and I had not been terminated from my employment. So I don't believe that fact alone says anything about whether or not I had willfully, so intentionally or deliberately, not filed my taxes on time. The fact that I ultimately filed my taxes, the fact that I've never filed late before, and the fact that I was going through shingles and long COVID for an extended period of time, in my opinion, shows that I had every intention of filing my taxes as I always have, and if it wasn't for a global pandemic and the subsequent difficulty of recovering from COVID, I would have certainly done so as well. And so, the definition of long COVID includes forgetfulness, the inability to think clearly. Those are all things that, in my mind, that's what the American Medical Association says about COVID and long COVID. Those are all things that I think would show that I was not willfully, intentionally, or deliberately filing my taxes late. The reason that I have asked Kristen to join was because of the fact that I was declined initially and then ultimately subsequently appealed here. And it was pointed out that I had not lost my position, I had not lost my job. And so I'm the president of a small company. We're a logistics company. We do grocery logistics and government logistics. We move people in the military from one place to another. We're a company of about 15 or 16 employees. We have shrunk since COVID. I've asked Kristen to come. She runs the finance team and the human resources team to ask. Is it okay if I ask her the few questions that I wanted to ask at this point?
Yes, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, the question that I have for Kristen is, during COVID, during the initial part of the pandemic, did we have multiple people from the company have COVID and people who suffered from long COVID?
Yes,
Did any of those people lose their job? Did we as a company say that none of those people could continue to work during that time?
absolutely not.
And is it true that we allowed people to take as much time as they needed to fully recover? And in one case, without revealing any personal information or health information, is it true that we had a person that was out for 4 to 5 months with COVID and ultimately was hospitalized, and that person kept their job and was not terminated as an employee of our company?
Yes, that's correct.
So in that same vein, am I one of those people that had COVID and was suffering through an extended period of the illness and also did not lose their job as a result?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so those are the only questions that I had for Kristen. I think what that shows is that there were a number of people at our company and in many companies that obviously had significant issues with COVID, suffered some serious health-related issues, dealt with long COVID for extended periods of time. I would like to also point out that in my note from the doctor, he starts out by saying that as of the time of his writing in May of 2023, that I was still under his medical care. Yeah, I think that's it. So, again, in the end, my summation would be that, or maybe there's a time for summation later. Is that correct?
Yes, you'll have an additional time to make a final statement at the end of the hearing, but feel free to conclude here, and we're going to come back to you anyway.
So in conclusion, it has never been my intention to file taxes late. I certainly would not want to do it in a very consequential tax year where I would face a severe penalty. I was suffering from shingles. I was suffering from COVID. I ended up having long COVID as well. There is no precedent at our company that said that somebody who had COVID and was incapacitated for a long period of time would have to be placed on leave or terminated or put on disability. So I believe that those things together show that I had no willful, so again, intentional or deliberate basis or reason to not file my taxes on time, and I was just generally struggling and working as best I could at times, but again, suffering from long COVID, which brain fog is real and for me, the way that manifests itself was I flat out forgot to file my taxes, while I was recovering and in bed for a long period of time. I would respectfully ask that the panel of judges reverse the initial order. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I have some questions, but before I ask my questions, does Franchise Tax Board have any questions for the witness?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Do my co-panelists have any questions for appellants, starting with Judge Leon?
No questions from me, Judge Long. Thank you.
Judge Clutter, do you have any questions?
This is Judge Clutter. I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to know, so I'm looking at the letter from your doctor. Is there any documentation from your doctor to show that you had long COVID as opposed to just regular COVID?
I would think so. I visited my doctor multiple times. I didn't submit any of that because in the initial request, it said that I needed to show that I had a legitimate medical reason. It didn't sort of say that you had to kind of get into very specifics. And when I asked my doctor to write the letter, I actually initially did not even see what he wrote. He sent it directly on to the Franchise Tax Board. So it wasn't clear to me how specific he had gotten or how, whatever lack of specificity. It wasn't until later on when I actually saw the appeal denial that I saw the letter that my doctor had written.
Okay, and then sort of similarly with the shingles question, do you have documentation for how long you were suffering from the shingles diagnosis?
Well, he does say that there were 2 cases of shingles in this particular letter.
Right.
And so I could go back and get the charts from him as to all of my medical care during that time. Again, I was not aware that level of specificity would be required. It just didn't occur to me.
I think that would be helpful to me to have all of the information if possible. If I leave the record open after this hearing for 30 days for you to submit, would that be enough time for you to get any additional documentation?
I believe so. I'm fairly certain that my physician has an online health portal and that I could download the patient charts for that period of time. I have not looked at them myself. I don't know exactly what they say. And I don't know how much he was charting at that time. Some of our visits were virtual. A couple of them were in person. So I haven't seen those, but if that would help in this scenario, I would certainly go and look to download those records, or if I can't get them online, I would go and request them myself.
Okay, I think that I'm going to ask that you do so. I'm going to leave the record open for 30 days for you to do that. And then Franchise Tax Board will also have an opportunity to respond to any submissions that you make. Okay?
Okay.
All right. With that, does that conclude your opening presentation, Mr. McCarthy?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, then we will move to Franchise Tax Board's presentation. Franchise Tax Board, you also requested 10 minutes. If you can begin when you're ready.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon again. My name is Eric Udall, representing the Franchise Tax Board. As you stated, the issue is whether appellant has shown reasonable cause for failure to timely file his taxable year 2021 return. Appellant's return was due no later than April 2022. And when he filed that return late in January 2023, FTB imposed a late filing penalty. Appellant has argued he's entitled to refund of that penalty because he was ill with shingles on or around the original filing deadline, and then he contracted COVID and later suffered from the effects of long COVID. Appellant provided evidence of his shingles illness contemporaneous to the original filing deadline, and then his physician states he had COVID in May, but appellant has not provided any evidence of a diagnosis or treatment of long COVID during the automatic extension period that ended October 15th, 2022, or for any period afterward. FTB is cited in its pleading to precedential case law, specifically Head and Feliciano and Triple Crown Baseball LLC, that hold when a taxpayer sacrifices the timeliness of his affairs to pursue other aspects, the taxpayer bears the consequences of that choice. FTB has provided evidence to show that those precedential opinions should apply to appellant here. He continued to earn income throughout the tax year, as illustrated in FTB's Exhibit D. Appellant stated in Exhibit E that work was his top priority while he was ill. In FTB's recently submitted Exhibit F, appellant conducted numerous trades of stock during the 2021 extended filing period, in the period which he states he had COVID. Appellant also indicated in his claim for refund attached to his appeal that he needed to spend a fair amount of time to audit his expenses from his Airbnb properties before he could file. Collectively, this evidence supports the conclusion that appellant was able to attend to other affairs during the original and the extended filing period. In the appeal of Belcher, the Office of Tax Appeals held that illness or other personal difficulties may be considered reasonable cause if taxpayers present credible and competent proof that they were continuously prevented from filing a tax return. When taxpayers allege reasonable cause based on incapacity due to illness, the duration of the incapacity must approximate that of the tax obligation deadline. The Office of Tax Appeals stated that because Belcher did not file by the original deadline, its focus was on the automatic extension period. Belcher was found to have enrolled in college courses on at least a half-time basis during the extended filing period and to have maintained rental properties. The Office of Tax Appeals stated that these facts showing that Belcher was active in non-tax matters weighed against her ability to prove that her illness rendered her incapable of ordinary business care and prudence during the period in which the failure to file continued. Despite testimony here and even any evidence that appellant can provide after the fact, we know for a fact by looking at this evidence that appellant facilitated a number of stock trades in May and June of 2022. He maintained rental properties during the extended filing period, and he continued to earn wage income throughout the year, which is consistent with his own words in Exhibit E, that he worked a lot from home during this period, and that was his top priority. FTB would point out that even if appellant could establish reasonable cause to abate the late filing penalty, the late payment penalty would apply instead because he did not pay his liability timely. Regardless, it is FTB's position that appellant has not established with this evidence or testimony that his circumstances continuously prevented him from filing a timely return, because despite any illness, the evidence shows his ability during the extended filing period. Like the taxpayer in Belcher, he was able to attend to other non-tax affairs. Therefore, FTB requests that the Office of Tax Appeals sustain its denial of appellant's claim for refund of the late filing penalty. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do my co-panelists have any questions? Judge Young, do you have any questions?
I think just one. Mr. Udall, taxpayer states that he's never been late before. Do you agree with that?
I believe I do agree with that, yes.
Thank you. That's all, Judge Long.
Thank you. Judge Clutter, do you have any questions?
Yes, this is Judge Clutter. I just have one clarifying question for Mr. Udall. Is FTB asserting that appellant demonstrated willful neglect, or just that appellant has not shown reasonable cause?
I don't believe there's any willful neglect, but certainly there's an absence of reasonable cause.
Judge Clutter, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, so we will move on to appellant's final statement. Mr. McCarthy, you have 5 minutes, and you may begin when ready.
Thank you again. I think the only thing I would like to add is that um, the notion that I was maintaining a rental property. I live in San Diego, California. I own an Airbnb in a town called Dunsmuir, which is up by the border of Oregon and California. It's about a 12-hour drive from San Diego. Bought that house when I used to live in San Francisco. I was not maintaining the Airbnb property during the period of time between the tax deadline and when I ultimately filed. I had not been to that area at all during that time. I had a person who has managed it, done the cleaning for it, responds to people online. So I don't think the fact that I have an Airbnb that is managed by a third party shows that I was maintaining a property that is 12 hours from where I live. I think it is true. To be frank, I don't fully recall making any stock trades during that time, but I don't dispute that the record probably shows that I did. This is a period of time when I was suffering from COVID, in bed, working when I could, when I was able to focus a little bit. And I think that the likelihood is that I had in my account orders to be triggered, as is common in stock trading, when a particular threshold is hit, a sale price or a purchase price or what have you. That's a regular practice that I do. I don't have, I'm not an expert in stock trading, but I do that occasionally. I don't want to dispute that I made those trades. I would dispute that that I might have been actively managing money at that time. My best, again, recollection or best notion from that time is that those are probably trades that were auto executed based on things that I had put into my account. What you call a GTC trade, a good till canceled trade, and those trades get triggered when a stock hits a particular threshold. I do not recall making any stock trades during that time. So there's that. I think that's all that I would like to add at this point. Thank you. I can't hear anything.
Judge Long, you're on mute.
My apologies. I just want to double check with my co-panelists that there are no questions before we close today's hearing. Judge Leung, do you have any questions?
One brief one for Mr. McCarthy. Sir, what happened on the federal side? Did you file your federal return on time? If not, what happened?
No, I did not file the federal return on time. I filed the federal return at the same time in conjunction with my accountant. The federal return did not have a tax consequence, a penalty, I believe. It was sort of a unique aspect to that particular tax year for me. I owned some stock in a company that I founded. When we set up that company, we set it up where you have what's called a qualifying small business tax exemption. And so a certain amount of the initial sale of a founder's stock is exempt from federal taxes. So I ended up that year only really paying a significant amount of money to California and not to the Fed. And I don't recall if there was a penalty. If there was, it was insignificant enough to not cause me to appeal it. And maybe, I don't know that my recollection is perfect, but I think that maybe the federal timeline was changed because of COVID. I'm not sure about that, but there was a much bigger delta between what I owed to California and what I owed to the Fed. They were both filed at the same time, both in January.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Judge Clutter, do you have any questions?
This is Judge Clutter. I do not have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we are ready to conclude this hearing. The record will be held open until Monday, October 21st, 2024, for appellant to provide briefing and evidence on the duration of his illnesses. As noted earlier in the hearing, Franchise Tax Board will be given the opportunity to review anything that appellant submits and responds to it. Thereafter, we will send a written opinion of the decision within 100 days of closing the record. Thank you everyone for coming in today or calling in today. Today's hearing in the appeal of McCarthy is now adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.